Los Angeles Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford is the most disrespected quarterback in the National Football League, and I'm about to tell you why. All right, welcome in, folks. Today we're going to be discussing Matthew Stafford and why I believe he is ultimately the most disrespected quarterback in the entire NFL. Before we get into it, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and let's dive right into this thing. So, Matthew Stafford, where did we start? Well, we have to remind you how we got here. Obviously, yes, we know the Rams made the trade to acquire Matthew Stafford, the 34-year-old quarterback. However, there is more to this story, and it starts in Detroit. Before joining the team, everyone thought they had him figured out. A stat patter, they said. A loser who couldn't get it done when it mattered, they said. And while 74, 90, and 1 all time with the Lions, and those are actually facts, believe it or not. The truth is that while Stafford was a very talented quarterback, he was not on a good roster. But people didn't want to hear that. There was no excuse coming from the outside world, and that was not going to happen. Matthew Stafford wouldn't have approved of it either. He wanted to win. Forget about his 39 game-winning drives in combination with fourth-quarter comebacks. That didn't matter at the end of the day because he was just a stat patter who was gifted Calvin Johnson, anointed as the number 1 overall pick, had never won a playoff game, and really didn't have to pay his dues as he started day 1 in the NFL. However, people seem to forget that while he had Calvin Johnson for 7 years, there were 5 other years he didn't have Calvin Johnson. He had Kenny Golladay, who has not been the same player since leaving him and going to the Giants. He had Marvin Jones, who has not been the same player going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had Danny Amendola, who just retired, and he was throwing seam busters down the field to third-string tight ends because at the end of the day, a really good quarterback in the NFL, that is not a stat patter, and that is not made by the talent around him, throws to whoever is on the field, and that is exactly what Matthew Stafford has done throughout his entire career. Sure, he was 0-3 in the playoffs, but those things deserve context. The first game against the New Orleans Saints, he had 4 total touchdowns, and the defense gave up 45 points. The second game, he went up against the Dallas Cowboys. A bad call cost them the game. And the third game, his running back was Zach Zenner. Hard to win a game in Seattle against the Legion of Boom with just Zach Zenner at running back. Speaking of supporting casts, we said, at least if you were on the aisle of Matthew Stafford's defense, we had been saying if he just had a defense, if he had a better team, imagine what this guy could do. And sure enough, looking at the stats here, he definitely did that. You look all the way across from 2009 to 2021, you see a common theme here. He didn't really have much of a defense. He had 1 year, they were second in the league in 2014. Aside from that, 32nd, 26th, 21st, 29th, 15th, 15th, 29th, 28th, 22nd, 31st, 32nd, and then finally he goes to the Rams and instantly has the number 1 defense according to PFF. Now, these are PFF stats, so I don't want to say it's entirely the end-all be-all, but it is worth pointing out. In addition to that, you look at the number 1 offensive line, pass blocking-wise, according to PFF. It's not to say he never had protection in the past, but to say that he had better protection than he did with the Rams would be incorrect. Even still, he did not get the running game going in LA. You saw Darrell Henderson show you some good things last year, Sony Michel. It wasn't the Todd Gurley running back room that helped Jared Goff out. Instead, they dealt with 2 running backs. Their starting running back ended up tearing his Achilles, and so Matthew Stafford once again made do with what he had. The previous year, he had the 30th ranked running back room, 23rd, 24th, 32nd, 17th, 27th, 8th, 24th, 16th, 24th, 18th, 18th. That means, according to PFF, he has only had a top 10 running back room once in his entire career back in 2014. We'll see what ends up happening this year, but it goes to show you that Matthew Stafford can still, despite not having the supporting cast, can still will his team to victory, and we saw that throughout the course of his career with all the fourth quarter comebacks and all of the come from behind victories that he has accumulated throughout his career. Even still, they had the 8th wide receiver room in the NFL due to the Robert Woods injury, due to Jacob Harris getting hurt, Tutu Atwell getting hurt, Odell Beckham Jr. not joining the team until later on, Deshaun Jackson basically quitting the team before the halfway point of the season, and Van Jefferson playing the entire second half of the season injured. When you put these metrics together, and again, it's not the Bible, PFF can be wrong, but when you look at this chart I made, it really shows you that all along, the only argument that people had for Matthew Stafford is that he's very talented and he's not on a good team. And so in his first season, he goes right to a good team and they win the Super Bowl. He goes from 0-3 in the playoffs to now Super Bowl champion. He's the only quarterback in NFL history to win the Super Bowl throwing 3 touchdowns and not win Super Bowl MVP. I don't want to jump the gun too far because I have plenty more where that came from, but just making it very clear, Matthew Stafford's supporting cast always mattered. It would matter with any quarterback in the league. If you look, Tom Brady's had a top 10 defense pretty much throughout the entire course of his career. If Tom Brady didn't have a top 10 defense, where would he be? Where would other guys be if they didn't have Marvin Harrison to throw the ball to? Everyone looks at Matthew Stafford having Calvin Johnson early on in his career, but fails to remember that Calvin Johnson, as great as he was the guy in the wide receiver room. There wasn't much there. They had the 9th ranked wide receiver room, and that is including the record-shattering season Calvin Johnson had in 2011. 2012, Calvin Johnson had another insane season, and they were 20th in the league. So what does that tell you? Having said all of that, what we need to realize is that Matthew Stafford finally has an offense curated to every strength he has in the book. I know that sounds kind of funny because last year he had Odell Beckham Jr., Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, Darrell Henderson, Sony Michel, and all sorts of guys. But what it really comes down to is this. This team is better than last year's team. This team is going into a second year in this offense. That means it's a second year for Matthew Stafford. His first year they won the Super Bowl. Yes, this year's going to be tougher schedule-wise, but it is unbelievable the amount of doubt and the amount of slander that Matthew Stafford continues to get despite proving everyone wrong. And honestly, I just explained to you why he continues to get the slander. He proved everyone wrong. I mean, not you, probably you watching this, most of you probably believed in him. I believed in him. I said when the Rams acquired him, they'd win the Super Bowl. But not everyone did, and you can see that in their biased perspectives. You can see that in their opinions, in their predictions, their projections, whatever. You can see that. Tampa is the favorite. Tampa's always the favorite. Tom Brady, he's 45 years old. He's got to be the favorite. Matthew Stafford beat him head-to-head last year twice. I've gone on record saying this in multiple videos, but I'm saying it again. Yes, I understand quarterbacks don't duel against each other, but still, this team has beaten the Buccaneers repeatedly. If you had any argument at all, it would be the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers, who the Rams and mainly Sean McVay has not figured out how to beat since his buddy Matt LaFleur went over there and became their head coach. They have not beaten the Packers. That would be a fair assessment. Just think about this. If you take away November, and I'm not saying you should take away stats, but if you take away November, he was literally top 3 in every single passing statistic. It took a really bad end to the season for him to fall off, and even still ended up throwing 40-plus touchdowns. His 17 interceptions is the highest he's had since 2013, which I'm not really worried about. And on top of that, now everybody is trying to make this elbow thing more than it really is, when last year he dealt with an elbow injury, he dealt with a wrist injury, he dealt with a back injury, he was banged up. This guy plays through the pain. Most people don't realize that because a lot of people weren't watching Detroit Lions football, but this guy has always played through the pain. You could ask any Detroit Lion fan that, and he's already gone on record and said he wants to continue playing. He signed a 5-year deal this offseason. And so while that is a talking point that has come up, will his body allow him to continue to play? I don't have any doubt that Matthew Stafford will be ready to go for not only week 1, but week 1 next year, week 1 the year after, week 1 the year after that. This guy is a baller. He has been doing his job in Detroit. He finally got a chance. He got an upgrade for the offensive line, for the running backs, although measly. You talk about 16th ranked Rams running back room, probably the worst running back room in Sean McVay's history, and still it's top 3 all time in Matthew Stafford's career for running back rooms. In addition to that, you now have Allen Robinson. Okay, they might get Odell, but that's not really a big deal right now. They have Allen Robinson. They have Tutu Atwell, who just had a great camp. They have Cooper Kupp coming off a Triple Crown season. Van Jefferson will be ready to go. Cam Akers is back and healthy. The emergence of Bryson Hopkins, Tyler Higbee, an offensive line that should be potentially around the top 10 range. We'll see what ends up happening there. And a defense that was number 1 last year according to PFF, and there's no reason to assume that they couldn't be there again this year. He's got the supporting cast, and so anybody doubting Matthew Stafford at this point just doesn't want to get proven wrong yet again. So why is it that people tend to hate Matthew Stafford, or at least seem that way? He seems like a good guy. He definitely, has carried himself that way since being with LA, doing plenty of charity work with his wife in Detroit and LA. It seems kind of odd that people hate this man so much. They cannot put him up here. He has to stay down here. I think this stems back to, if you remember, Matt Ryan when he won the MVP. A lot of people had a little bit of an issue with that. Yes, he was absolutely deserving that year. He didn't win the Super Bowl, though, and that's where the similarities end. But when you look at Matt Ryan, it's the tale of people being uncomfortable moving players up rungs. And that is what I've noticed throughout sports. When a player starts playing well, but he's playing better than what his tier would have him at, it's a hard adjustment, especially for people that have already made their ranking system and they have a guy listed low or whatever. If it makes them look bad, they ultimately don't like it. And we're all human, so I'm not going to act like I've never done that either. However, last year, Matthew Stafford threw 41 touchdowns. He was second in the league, only behind Tom Brady. He was top 3 in passing yards in a brand new offense, a myriad of injuries, including which he was playing through. And on top of that, a dreadful November that probably would have derailed just about any team in the league, except his play elevated down the stretch. He threw 10 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions in the playoffs, and he became the first quarterback in NFL history to throw 50 touchdowns and 6,000 yards passing when you combine postseason. No quarterback's ever done that, and you don't hear about that. It's not talked about. He is not the guy that people are asking, who would you rather have? Instead, I've heard more about Joe Burrow, who's been ranked higher in all sorts of power rankings. I've heard more about the quarterback that lost the Super Bowl to the quarterback we're talking about, Matthew Stafford, and I just don't think that's fair. I think there's clearly a slander here. I think people don't want to admit that Matthew Stafford was always very good. They instead look at different ways to critique him, to deflect. He's in a super team. It's not him, it's Sean McVay. Well, if it wasn't him and it was Sean McVay, then why did it take the Rams until he became the starting quarterback? They went out and traded for him for Sean McVay to get over the hump in winning the Super Bowl. That's not a knock on Sean McVay. That is what I'm saying, in that Jared Goff was a good quarterback, but he lost his way. Matthew Stafford was a great quarterback, but never had a path. He was never on a team that had a defense, that had an offense combined in one, that had a team that he didn't have to carry on his back. And ultimately, I don't think that makes him a bad quarterback. I don't think that takes anything away from him, because we already saw what this guy is capable of doing, carrying his team on his back without really much of any help on the defensive side of the ball. It's time. If today is the first time you're hearing about this, great. If you are sitting here and you're watching this video and you yourself thinks that Matthew Stafford is overrated, please please, please watch the tape, watch Jared Goff's tape in LA, look at his stats, compare his stats to the guys you think are better, and come back to me. Because when you really think about it and you remove the notion that this guy doesn't belong in that tier, you start to realize that he does belong in that tier. And it's okay that he's around talent. But also, if we're going to use the talent against him, then why do we not give him credit for winning a Super Bowl when he was down to Cooper Kupp, Bryson Hopkins, Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers coming back off an Achilles, Ben Skoranek, an injured Van Jefferson, no Tyler Higbee, no Robert Woods, 1/4 of Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, we gotta be fair here. And that's the thing. We see the weapons used for Matthew Stafford. We never see it used the other way around. Oh, well, Matthew Stafford has Cooper Kupp. Matthew Stafford has this. Matthew Stafford has that. Well, the majority of last year, he didn't have Odell Beckham Jr. Von Miller didn't join the roster until later on in the year, and it's always used against him. But why isn't it used against other players? Why isn't it used against Tom Brady, who would have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and just got Russell Gage and has had Rob Gronkowski? Why is it never used against him? Why is it never used against guys like that? And it's only used on Matthew Stafford. Explain that to me. Matthew Stafford was third in completed air yards, only behind Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson. This isn't a guy that was just dinking and dunking. And he didn't have Todd Gurley in his prime like Jared Goff did. I think it is incredibly impressive, and I don't think we talk about it enough how impressive his season was. Yes, he struggled down the stretch, as I've already mentioned, but his postseason was amazing. His 2 interceptions in the Super Bowl really stem from the fact that he threw it to Ben Skoranek, who tipped it up in the air and had that picked off, and then he threw it up and gave Van Jefferson, an injured Van Jefferson, a shot to go up and high point the football and win that battle against Jesse Bates, and he stared up and looked at it in the end zone. That's not on Stafford. Since when did this league become what ifs? I've never seen more excuses against a quarterback in my entire life. This is actually the easiest player to defend in the history of sports for me because he has so many things that make his arguments easy and just ruin other people's arguments. How come it's always about, oh, well, he got the job done? It didn't matter when Tom Brady beat the Rams in Super Bowl 53, having not played that well, pretty much carried by the defense. It was a pretty defensive game. That didn't matter. He got the win, right? It didn't matter how he beat Patrick Mahomes. The fact that almost the entire offensive line was out. No, he won the game. It didn't matter when Aaron Rodgers, with a better defense and honestly not really at his best, beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. That didn't matter. He just won the Super Bowl. Same thing with Russell Wilson. It didn't matter that Russell Wilson was nowhere near where he ended up being at the time he won the Super Bowl and that he had the Legion of Boom. It was just that he won the Super Bowl. He got the job done. Joe Flacco. The list goes on. Well, why does it not matter that Matthew Stafford did that? He did that and then some. And there's still people out there that want to say that he was carried by this team. They do not win the Super Bowl without him. If you want to place any quarterback in that scenario against the Bengals being down, I don't see anybody winning that game. Tom Brady in his prime, okay, fine. But Tom Brady right now, who knows? He beat Tom Brady. He beat Jimmy Garoppolo. He beat Kyler Murray. He beat all of these quarterbacks to get to the big stage, and then he beat Joe Burrow, and people still don't want to give him his credit. He wasn't even in the top 10 in the NFL top 100 list. That is ridiculous. He was absolutely a top 10 player last year. He's a top 3 quarterback in standing right now, and the only reason people do not want to admit that is the fact that they don't want to be proven wrong. Hate to break it to you, you were wrong about Stafford. If you didn't think the Rams could win a Super Bowl with Stafford, if you thought the trade sucked, if you thought that Goff was better, if you thought that he was another Jared Goff, or if you thought and you said the word stat padford, or you said that he couldn't win the playoffs, you, in any of these 5 categories, were wrong. So in conclusion, Matthew Stafford is an elite quarterback. He is one of the best quarterbacks in football. He's going into year 2 in this offense with Sean McVay, who just won a Super Bowl, the youngest coach ever to win a Super Bowl. He's going into his second year with a great defense behind him, doesn't have to carry this team, potentially a better running back room than last year. And on top of that, he's going into this year with Allen Robinson. The biggest knock on Matthew Stafford was that he couldn't win games in the playoffs. And then the biggest knock after he did that was that he threw 17 interceptions. I still see people saying that. 17 interceptions and the elbow injury. 17 interceptions is nothing. Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow had 2 and 3 fewer interceptions. That's not a huge difference. Matthew Stafford threw more touchdowns than all 3 of them, but that doesn't fit a narrative. Just like the elbow. I showed you he already had the elbow injury. He went through it last year. It's not like it flared up. It's not like it's worse this year, but that doesn't fit a narrative. People are running out of different storylines to say. They're evading the obvious. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The closest thing that we have gotten to the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick Patriots dynasty is this Rams team. It's why I believe that Matthew Stafford is going to win his second Super Bowl at the end of this season in 2 tries, and he will have more than Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and all the quarterbacks except really Tom Brady at that point. And that is exactly how it should be. A guy who has paid his dues in a different type of way, was drafted number 1 overall, and didn't come up as a number 199 overall pick like Tom Brady did, but he had to pay his dues in a different way. He went through the pain and all of the losing in Detroit to get to LA, prove himself. He finally gets the opportunity and grabs life by the horns, does the impossible, winning the Super Bowl for the LA Rams, the second Super Bowl in the history of this franchise, and the 4th championship. They had not won a Super Bowl since Kurt Warner was the starting quarterback, and Matthew Stafford, 1 year it took. What can he do now in the second year of this offense, knowing more, adding more, having Allen Robinson, just all of the additions, the growth of Sean McVay, how much this team grew coaching-wise, player development. They are sleeping on this quarterback. They are trying to bury him. You see it all over social media. You see it all over those engagement posts. No one wants to admit that the next Super Bowl winning quarterback is not Joe Burrow. It's not Justin Herbert. It's not one of the young guns. It is indeed Matthew Stafford. And if he had joined this team earlier in his career, say he joined it in 2017 with Sean McVay, the Rams would already have 3 Super Bowl wins at the very least. He is a damn good quarterback. He's been an elite quarterback in a bad situation. I just proved that to you. Stop sleeping on him. Matthew Stafford is an elite quarterback. Even though he doesn't need to, he will prove it once again, winning Super Bowl 57 and winning back-to-back seasons, and will be at the helm of the first dynasty since the New England Patriots, helmed by Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. But you heard it here first. Maybe I'm wrong. Leave it in the comments below. Let me know, what am I wrong about? If you agreed, if I changed your opinion, also drop that below. What are your thoughts? Do you think Matthew Stafford's underrated, overrated, or properly rated? Let me know below. That's going to do it for me. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and I am signing off. You guys take care. Later.